I'm Claire Bennett Richard, 22 years old, and the day I became valedictorian should have been the proudest moment of my life. Instead, it became the day I finally confronted years of family betrayal. My parents claimed they were too tired to attend my graduation, but social media revealed the truth. They were enjoying a spa day with my sister, Sophia Bennett. For years, I'd swallowed my pain, focused on academics, and tried to earn the love that should have been freely given. But that day, standing at the podium, something inside me finally broke free. Before I tell you how my sister ended up crying in that parking lot, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Growing up as the academically focused older daughter in the Richard family wasn't easy. From my earliest memories, I always felt like I existed in the shadow of my younger sister. My parents, Richard and Elaine Bennett, were successful professionals with impossibly high expectations. Dad ran his own accounting firm, while Mom was a real estate agent who specialized in luxury properties. They provided everything materially: nice house in the suburbs, private school education, piano lessons, but emotional support was distributed with striking inequality. My sister, Sophia Bennett, younger by 3 years, seemed to effortlessly capture our parents' attention and affection from the moment she was born. Where I was serious and studious, Sophia Bennett was bubbly and beautiful. Where I was awkward and introverted, she was charismatic and popular. It wasn't Abby's fault. Not really, but the pattern was established early and only deepened as we grew up. I remember my 8th grade science fair. Vividly, I had spent months researching the effects of different fertilizers on plant growth, creating detailed charts, and preparing my presentation. I won first place, earning a spot in the regional competition. That same weekend, Sophia Bennett had participated in a beginner's dance recital. She wasn't particularly talented at dance. She'd only started lessons a month prior, but she enjoyed it. When we arrived home that evening, my blue ribbon was acknowledged with a distracted, "That's nice, Claire Bennett." And while my parents spent the entire dinner gushing about Abby's participation trophy and how graceful she looked on stage, they hung her recital photo on the refrigerator, but my science fair certificate was tucked away in a drawer. This wasn't an isolated incident. As the years passed, the pattern became painfully predictable. My parents missed my debate competitions, where I regularly placed first, citing work commitments, but somehow cleared their schedules for every single one of Abby's cheerleading events. Family vacations were always planned around Abby's social calendar, even if it meant conflicting with my academic commitments. The summer before my junior year, I had qualified for an intensive writing workshop at Northwestern University, a prestigious opportunity that could bolster my college applications. My parents scheduled our family trip to the Bahamas during the exact same week. When I pointed out the conflict, my father shrugged and said, "Well, you can always find another workshop." But Sophia Bennett already made plans with her friends to come along. I stayed home alone for a week while they enjoyed white sand beaches. Thank goodness for Mrs. Harper, my English teacher, who recognized my writing talent when my parents couldn't be bothered. She was the one who suggested I apply for that workshop in the first place. When I couldn't attend, she arranged for me to shadow a local journalist instead. "Your words have power, Claire Bennett," she told me. "Don't let anyone dim your light." Those words sustained me through high school when parental validation was scarce. College was my escape. I chose a university 4 hours away, close enough to visit occasionally, but far enough to build my own life. There I met Megan, my freshman roommate, who quickly became the sister I'd always wished for. Where Sophia Bennett and I had grown further apart over the years, compelled by our parents' obvious favoritism, Megan and I connected immediately. She came from a large, loving family and couldn't understand why my parents rarely called or visited. "They're just busy," I'd say, the excuse rolling off my tongue from years of practice. Megan would give me that look, part sympathy, part outrage, but never pushed. Then I met Daniel in my sophomore American literature class. We bonded over our shared love of Steinbeck and coffee strong enough to dissolve a spoon. He was the first person who made me feel truly seen. "You know you deserve better, right?" he asked after witnessing a particularly dismissive phone call with my mother. I didn't know how to respond. The concept was so foreign to me. I had built my entire identity around academic achievement, hoping that if I collected enough awards, degrees, and accolades, my parents might finally notice me. It became my coping mechanism, my way of proving my worth. Each perfect test score, each academic honor was another piece of evidence that I mattered, that I deserved space, attention, love. My first semester of college tested this coping mechanism severely. Removed from the familiar structure of high school and facing more challenging coursework, I struggled academically for the first time. My carefully constructed identity began to crumble. When midterm grades were posted and I saw 2 B's and a C, I had a full-blown panic attack in my dorm room. Megan found me hyperventilating on the floor, convinced that these less-than-perfect grades confirmed what I'd always secretly feared, that I wasn't special, wasn't worthy of attention or love. With Megan's support and Daniel's encouragement, I slowly rebuilt my sense of self-worth. I pulled my grades up by semester's end, but more importantly, I began to separate my value as a person from my academic performance. Still, old habits die hard, and when senior year rolled around, I found myself working harder than ever. My application to graduate programs in journalism and creative writing depended on maintaining my GPA, and despite my personal growth, I still craved that external validation that had been so elusive throughout my childhood. When the email arrived from the dean of students informing me that I had been selected as valedictorian, I stared at my computer screen in disbelief. Me, valedictorian, the highest academic honor recognition of 4 years of dedication and hard work. Surely this would be enough. Surely this would make them proud. The valedictorian announcement came exactly 3 weeks before graduation. I remember staring at that email for a full 5 minutes before it fully registered. Not only had I maintained my position at the top of my class, but I would also be giving the commencement speech. My hands trembled as I called my parents. Mom answered on the 4th ring, the sound of a television show playing loudly in the background. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I have amazing news. I'm going to be valedictorian." There was a pause. Then, "That's nice, honey. What exactly does that mean?" I explained patiently, even though we'd attended my cousin's graduation 3 years earlier where the valedictorian role had been thoroughly discussed. "Well, congratulations," she said, but then immediately shifted gears. "Did you hear Sophia Bennett got invited to Jennifer Lawrence's stylist's assistant birthday party? She's networking with such important people in the fashion industry." Before I could respond, she was calling out to my dad, "Claire Bennett's got some school news. She's valid something, valedictorian mom." It means I had the highest GPA in my graduating class. I heard my dad's muffled voice in the background. Then Mom again. "Your father says, congratulations. When's the ceremony again?" I swallowed my disappointment at their lackluster response and focused on the logistics. May 15th at 11 whilst I'll be sending formal invitations, but I wanted to tell you personally. After hanging up, I threw myself into creating special handwritten invitations. I spent an entire evening on them, using the calligraphy skills I'd taught myself during freshman year. Each invitation included a personal note. For my parents, I wrote about how much it would mean to have them there for this milestone. The following weekend, I drove the 2 hours home to deliver the invitations in person. I'd timed my visit to coincide with dinner, hoping for a warm family evening. As usual, my hopes were quickly dashed. Sophia Bennett dominated the conversation with stories about her fashion internship and the almost famous people she'd met. My mother hung on every word while my father nodded appreciatively between bites of pot roast. When I finally managed to present my carefully crafted invitations, my father glanced at his and said, "You drove all this way just to give us these. You could have mailed them." My mother at least had the grace to thank me before setting her invitation aside to continue asking Sophia Bennett about some celebrity sighting. Before I left that evening, I confirmed once more. "So you'll both be there right May 15th at 11. The ceremony should last about 2 hours. My father nodded absently. Yes, we've got it marked down. Wouldn't miss it. Claire Bennett." That single statement, "wouldn't miss it," fueled me through the next 2 weeks as I worked on my valedictorian speech. I wanted it to be meaningful, not just the typical platitudes about futures and potential. I wrote about resilience, about finding your voice even when it feels like no one is listening. Mrs. Harper now retired, but still my mentor helped me refine it during weekend practice sessions at a local coffee shop. "This is beautiful, Claire Bennett," she said after my 3rd revision. "Your parents are going to be so proud." I nodded, wanting desperately to believe her. 3 days before graduation, my phone rang. It was my father. Something in his tone immediately sent warning signals through my body. Claire Bennett about the graduation ceremony. He began, his voice carrying that particular blend of dismissiveness and impatience I knew all too well. "Your mother and I have been thinking, and with all the traffic and the long ceremony, well, we're just too tired to make the trip." Too tired? The words hit me like a physical blow. "Too tired," I repeated. "But you promised I'm valedictorian. I'm giving the speech." "Yes, and we're very proud," he said, though his tone conveyed anything but pride. "But we've had a very busy month and we have other commitments to consider." In the background, I could hear my mother calling something about appointments and schedules. "What other commitments?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just various things," he replied vaguely. "You know how it is. Your aunt might be able to come, though." I'll have her call you. Before I could protest further, he ended the call with a quick, got to go, good luck with the speech, take pictures. I sat in my dorm room, phone still clutched in my hand as the reality sank in. They weren't coming. The highest achievement of my academic career, possibly the most important day of my life thus far, and they couldn't be bothered to drive 2 hours because they were too tired. The tears came without warning, hot and furious. I curled into a ball on my bed, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. That's how Megan found me an hour later, tear-stained and hollow-eyed. They're not coming, I told her, voice ragged. They said they're too tired. Megan's expression shifted from concern to outrage. Too tired for their daughter's graduation where she's freaking valedictorian? Are you kidding me? Daniel arrived shortly after having received Megan's SOS text. He sat beside me on the bed, his hand warm on my back. I'm so sorry. That's just, there's no excuse for that. That night, the three of us sat in my dorm room revising my speech. You should call them out. Megan suggested, fierce loyalty burning in her eyes. Tell everyone how they couldn't be bothered to show up. Daniel was more measured. It's your speech. Claire Bennett. Whatever you decide to say, we're behind you 100%. I stared at my carefully crafted words about resilience and finding your voice. They felt hollow now, performative. But as the initial shock and hurt began to subside, a new emotion took its place. Determination. My parents might not be there to witness my achievement, but that didn't diminish its value. I would make this graduation special, despite their absence. I went to bed that night having decided to stick with my original speech. I wouldn't let their rejection define this moment. Little did I know the next morning would bring a revelation that would change everything. The morning before graduation, I woke early, feeling a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Habit led me to check social media, while still in bed scrolling through last-minute congratulations from classmates and distant relatives. That's when I saw it. My finger froze mid-scroll over an Instagram story posted by my sister just 3 hours earlier. Sophia Bennett, smiling widely, held up a champagne flute flanked by our parents who were also holding glasses. The caption read, Family Spa Day. So needed this. I blinked, certain I was misreading, but the timestamp was clear, 2:13 a.m., meaning they had posted this the night before. While I was crying in my dorm room over their supposed exhaustion, they were planning a spa day with Sophia Bennett, my hands trembling. I swiped through the rest of Abby's story. Photo after photo showed them enjoying massages, facials, and a lavish lunch at an upscale restaurant I recognized from their city's downtown area. In one particularly painful image, my mother and Sophia Bennett posed in matching plush robes, my mother's arm around Abby's shoulders, both beaming at the camera. The caption, Mother-Daughter Goals. Below it, my mother had commented, Best day with my baby girl. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. It wasn't just that they weren't coming to my graduation. They had flat out lied about being too tired. They weren't tired at all. They simply preferred to spend the weekend pampering my sister. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to Megan with no comment. Her response was immediate. Those manipulative liars. Claire Bennett. I'm so sorry. But sorry didn't begin to cover the hollowness expanding in my chest. This wasn't just another disappointment. In a lifetime of disappointments, this was confirmation of what I'd always suspected, but tried to deny. I simply didn't matter to them as much as Sophia Bennett did. I tried calling my sister, fingers jabbing at the screen with more force than necessary. She didn't answer, so I sent a text instead. Saw your spa day posts. Interesting timing, given Mom and Dad told me they were too tired to come to my graduation. Daniel Oro. Her response came 20 minutes later. Don't be dramatic. They've been really stressed and needed relaxation. Not everything is about you and your school stuff. School stuff. My valedictorian graduation reduced to school stuff. I was still staring at her dismissive message when my phone rang. My grandmother calling from Florida. Claire Bennett, sweetie, just wanted to wish you good luck, Daniel Oro. I'm so sorry I can't be there, but my hip just won't cooperate with the travel. I swallowed hard, touched by her call. Thanks, Grandma. I understand. Your parents must be so excited. I was just talking to your mother yesterday about their dinner reservations for Saturday night. Some fancy place Michael's been wanting to try, apparently. The pieces clicked into place. Not only were they having a spa day, but they had dinner plans for the entire weekend. They were having a full family weekend, -1. Family member? Me dinner reservations? I asked, voice tight. My grandmother hesitated, sensing she'd said something wrong. Oh, I thought you knew. They mentioned having a nice family dinner after your sister's, oh dear. After an awkward end to the call, I sat motionless, phone clutched in my hand. The full scope of the betrayal was still sinking in. They weren't just missing my graduation for a day spa. They had planned an entire weekend of activities that pointedly excluded me. Something snapped inside me. Years of swallowed hurt of making excuses for their behavior, of telling myself that if I just achieved more, they would finally see me. It all crystallized into a sharp, clear certainty I was done. Being invisible. I pulled out my laptop and opened the document containing my graduation speech. The words I'd so carefully crafted now seemed naive, almost pathetic in their optimism. Without hesitation, I created a new document and began to write. Words poured out of me, fueled by a lifetime of neglect, and this final, unforgivable betrayal. I wrote about invisibility, about the pain of being overlooked, about the damage caused by conditional love. I wrote until my fingers cramped and my eyes burned, until the sky outside my window darkened and then lightened again. Daniel found me still typing at dawn, empty coffee cups surrounding my desk. "Have you been up all night?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I nodded, saving the document and printing 2 copies. I rewrote my speech. He picked up a page, eyebrows raising as he read, "Claire Bennett, this is raw, really powerful, but are you sure this could have serious consequences for your relationship with your parents?" I met his gaze steadily. "What relationship? The one where I'm an afterthought? The one where they lie to my face?" Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I get it, I do. And you have every right to be angry. Just be sure this is what you want. Once you say these things publicly, you can't take them back." His concern touched me, but my resolve didn't waver. I tucked both versions of my speech into my graduation folder. I've been invisible my entire life. Daniel, Oro. They'll finally see me, even if they weren't physically present. I knew how these things worked. The ceremony would be live-streamed. Someone, my aunt, a family friend, my grandmother would watch, and they would tell my parents. For once, they would have to acknowledge my pain. They would have to see me. Graduation morning dawned bright and clear. A postcard, perfect May Day, that seemed to mock my inner turmoil. Megan was already up when I emerged from a fitful sleep, arranging breakfast on our small dorm room desk. Coffee muffins and fresh strawberries. Fuel for the valedictorian, she announced with forced cheerfulness. I managed to smile, appreciating her effort, even as anxiety knotted my Daniel. We got ready together, her chatter filling the silence as I carefully applied makeup, determined not to look as emotionally wrecked as I felt. The graduation gown was unflattering on everyone, boxy and shapeless, but I took extra care with my appearance underneath a new navy blue dress I'd splurged on weeks ago, when I still believed my parents would see me wear it. Daniel arrived as we were pinning our caps in place, carrying a bouquet of sunflowers and a small wrapped package. "You look amazing," he said, kissing my cheek. "These are for you. Open the gift later when you're alone." I hugged him tightly, grateful beyond words for his steady presence. As we were preparing to leave, a knock at the door surprised us. Mrs. Harper stood in the hallway, elegant in a floral dress, her silver hair swept into a shiny. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, but I couldn't miss my star pupil's big day. Tears sprang to my eyes as I hugged my former teacher. "You came all this way?" 4 hours in the car with my husband snoring beside me, she confirmed with a wink, wouldn't have missed it. "And I brought you something." She handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a silver pen, obviously antique, with delicate engravings along the barrel. "It was my grandmother's," Mrs. Harper explained. "She was a journalist in the 1920s, when women weren't supposed to have such ambitions. I thought you should have it." One boundary breaker to another. The gesture nearly undid me. While my own parents couldn't be bothered to drive 2 hours, my high school English teacher had traveled twice that distance to support me. We arrived at the ceremony together, Megan, Daniel, and Mrs. Harper forming the family I'd chosen, rather than the one I was born into. The graduates were directed to our seating area. While guests found places in the audience, I couldn't help scanning the crowd, some tiny irrational part of me still hoping to see my parents despite everything. Instead, my eyes fell on the empty seats in the reserved section where they should have been. 3 vacant chairs mocking me with their emptiness. The ceremony began with the traditional processional, the university president's welcome speech, and various acknowledgments. I tried to focus to stay present, but my mind kept wandering to the speech in my folder. 2 versions, 2 choices. The original safe version about resilience and finding your voice, and the new one, raw, honest, born from last. Night's pain and years of accumulated hurt. Which would I choose when the moment came as the university dean approached the podium to introduce me? My heart hammered so loudly I was certain everyone around me could hear it. "It is my great pleasure to introduce this year's valedictorian," the dean announced, with the highest grade point average in the graduating class, numerous academic honors, including the Preston Journalism Award. and the Mercer Creative Writing Fellowship and Acceptance to Columbia University's prestigious master's program in journalism. Claire Bennett Richard. The audience applauded as I made my way to the podium. Folder clutched tightly in sweating hands, I glanced at the camera set up for the live stream, knowing that somewhere someone connected to my family might be watching. I pulled out both versions of my speech, setting them side by side on the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, supportive friends, proud families, faculty members who had guided my academic journey. I made my decision. 4 years ago, when we started this journey, I began pushing the original speech aside. Many of us came here searching for something. Knowledge. Certainly skills, of course. But for many of us, myself included, we were searching for visibility. My voice grew stronger with each word as I abandoned the script I'd rehearsed for weeks and spoke from the heart. We wanted to be seen, to matter, to have our efforts acknowledged and our presence valued. I stand before you today as your valedictorian, an achievement that represents countless hours of work, sacrifice, and perseverance. But I also stand before you as someone who has learned that external validation grades awards. Even this tremendous honor cannot fill the void left by those who should see you, but choose not to. A hush fell over the crowd as they realized this was not the typical inspirational graduation speech. In the audience, I could see Megan nodding encouragement, Daniel leaning forward intently, and Mrs. Harper watching with quiet pride. Many of us have experienced invisibility in various forms. Perhaps you weren't the favorite child. Perhaps your accomplishments were minimized while others were celebrated. Perhaps you were told explicitly or implicitly that your best was never quite good enough. Heads nodded throughout the audience. This was resonating with more people than just me. I spent years believing that if I just achieved more awards, higher grades, prestigious positions, I would finally be seen. That the people who should love me unconditionally would finally acknowledge my worth. What I've learned, what this university experience has taught me, is that visibility begins with seeing yourself clearly first. The words flowed from some deep, honest place within me. Unleashed after years of restraint, I spoke about finding true connection with friends who celebrated, rather than diminished my successes. I talked about mentors who saw potential, where family saw only ordinariness. And then I reached the climax of my speech, the words I'd written in the darkest hours of the night. Today, as I look out at this audience, I see empty seats where my family should be. They told me they were too tired to attend, though social media reveals they found energy for other celebrations this weekend. A murmur ran through the crowd, and that's okay, because their absence has taught me the most valuable lesson of all, that I am enough with or without their validation, that my achievements are worthy of celebration even if they're not. The ones doing the celebrating, I looked directly into the live stream camera, knowing my words might eventually reach them. So to everyone who didn't show up, not just today but throughout my life, this one's for you. Not as an act of anger, but as a declaration of independence. Your absence defined my past, but it will not determine my future. The silence was absolute for 3 heartbeats before the audience erupted. My fellow graduates stood applauding with a ferocity that suggested many of them had felt invisible too at points in their lives. Faculty members nodded, some wiping away tears. Mrs. Harper was openly crying, her phone held up to record the moment I returned to my seat, in a daze the remainder of the ceremony passing in a blur of handshakes and diploma covers. After the recessional, I was surrounded by classmates and professors offering congratulations, not just on the academic achievement, but on the courage of my speech. You said what so many of us have felt. One classmate told me, eyes bright with emotion, "Thank you for being our voice today." The university president himself shook my hand and said, "That was not what I expected, Ms. Richard, but it was exactly what needed to be said." Through it all, I felt a strange lightness. The hurt remained. How could it not, but speaking my truth had released something that had been trapped inside me for years. My phone was already buzzing with notifications. The speech had clearly made an impression, and the university's social media accounts were sharing clips. I ignored the devices for now, choosing instead to celebrate with the people who had shown up for me. Megan, Daniel, and Mrs. Harper took me to lunch at a nearby restaurant, toasting my achievement with sparkling cider and sharing their favorite moments from the ceremony. For a few hours, I allowed myself to simply enjoy their company and the accomplishment of graduation, pushing thoughts of my family to the background. But as the celebration wound down and we prepared to return to campus for final dorm checkouts, I knew the fallout was waiting. I just didn't expect it to begin in the empty parking lot of the auditorium, where I'd returned to retrieve the diploma cover I'd accidentally left behind. The post-graduation celebration at Giovanni's Italian restaurant was everything I could have wanted. Warm conversation, genuine laughter, and the comforting presence of people who truly cared about me. Megan kept refilling my water glass and sneaking extra breadsticks onto my plate, knowing I had barely eaten in the past 24 hours. Daniel's hand rested reassuringly on mine throughout the meal, his thumb occasionally brushing across my knuckles in silent support. Mrs. Harper regaled us with stories of her own college graduation decades earlier, somehow making us laugh despite the emotional weight of the day. For those 3 hours, I allowed myself to simply be present, to savor the milestone I had achieved, rather than dwelling on who wasn't there to witness it. My phone silenced and tucked into my purse, occasionally illuminated with notifications, but I ignored them all. This moment belonged to me and the family I had chosen. It wasn't until we were preparing to leave, settling the bill and gathering our belongings, that Mrs. Harper mentioned the online reaction. "Your speech is getting quite a bit of attention, Claire Bennett." The university posted a clip on their social media accounts, and it's already been shared hundreds of times. A flicker of anxiety rippled through me. "Have you seen any of the comments? Overwhelmingly positive," she assured me. "You struck a chord with a lot of people who have felt overlooked or undervalued. You gave voice to something universal." I nodded, still not ready to look at my phone. "I should get back to campus," I said. "I left my diploma cover in the auditorium, and we need to finish clearing out our dorm room by 5. We said our goodbyes in the restaurant parking lot with promises to keep in touch. Mrs. Harper was driving back home that evening, but made me promise to call her the following week to discuss my upcoming move to New York for graduate school. Daniel had to work the evening shift at the campus bookstore, but would come by the dorm later to help with final packing. Megan headed straight back to continue our room cleanup, while I made a detour to the now empty auditorium to retrieve my forgotten diploma cover. As I pulled into the nearly vacant parking lot, the first call came through. "My grandmother," I answered, steeling myself. "Claire Bennett, your speech was beautiful," she began, her voice wavering slightly, "though I think you've caused quite a stir within the family." My throat tightened. "They saw it. Your cousin Melissa was watching the live stream and called your mother immediately. I gather things are tense at the moment, understatement of the century." I thought, "Are they angry?" I asked, suddenly feeling very young and vulnerable despite the day's empowerment. "There's certainly something," my grandmother replied diplomatically. "But Claire Bennett, I want you to know that I'm proud of you, not just for your academic achievements but for speaking your truth. It couldn't have been easy." Her words warmed something cold inside me. "Thank you, Grandma. That means a lot." After promising to call her soon, I ended the call and checked my other notifications. 6 text messages from extended family members who had seen the online video, 2 voicemails from my father, which I wasn't ready to listen to, and a barrage of increasingly angry texts from Sophia Bennett. The most recent reading, "How could you embarrass our family like this? Mom is literally crying because of what you said. You've ruined our entire weekend." I silenced the phone again and slipped it back into my purse. The auditorium was unlocked but eerily quiet. After the morning's festivities, I found my diploma cover easily left on the chair where I'd been seated. As I turned to leave, a movement near the exit caught my eye. Sophia Bennett stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face flushed with anger. My sister looked exactly as she always did, perfectly put together in designer jeans and a blouse that probably cost more than my entire graduation outfit. Her hair was freshly styled, no doubt part of the spa treatment she'd enjoyed while I was preparing for the most important day of my academic career. "What are you doing here?" I asked, genuinely shocked to see her. "We drove 4 hours to deal with the mess you've created," she snapped. "Mom and Dad are at your dorm looking for you." My Estaniel act dropped at the thought of my parents confronting Megan. I pulled out my phone to warn her, but Sophia Bennett wasn't finished. "How could you be so selfish? Claire Bennett, so petty and vindictive. You've humiliated our entire family just to get attention." The accusation was so absurd, so completely backwards, that I actually laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed in the empty auditorium. "Selfish? I'm selfish? That's rich coming from the person who's had our parents' undivided attention for 22 years. Sophia Bennett rolled her eyes dramatically. "Here we go again with the poor, neglected older sister routine. You chose to be boring. Claire Bennett, you chose books and studying over having an actual personality. It's not my fault that I'm more interesting than you are." Years of stored pain and resentment burst forth like a broken dam. "Interesting. You think that's what this is about? Let me remind you of a few things, Sophia Bennett. When I was 16 and won the state writing competition, Mom and Dad didn't even read my essay. When you got a C+ on a history paper the same week, they hired you a private tutor and took you shopping as a consolation. When I got accepted to this university with a partial scholarship, they barely acknowledged it. When you decided to take a gap year to find yourself in Europe, they funded the entire trip. Every birthday, every Christmas, every family vacation. The pattern has been crystal clear. I wasn't asking for special treatment, just equal treatment. Abby's defensive posture faltered slightly. That's not fair. They've always supported you too. Really name one time they prioritized me over you. One time they chose to attend something important to me if it conflicted with your schedule. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to produce an example. They couldn't drive 2 hours to see me graduate as valedictorian. Sophia Bennett valedictorian. But they had plenty of energy for your spa day. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots of her own Instagram posts. You know what the worst part is? The lying. If they had just said, "We're choosing to spend the weekend with Sophia Bennett instead," at least that would have been honest, cruel, but honest. Instead, they said they were too tired while actually planning an entire weekend of activities that pointedly excluded me. Something shifted in Abby's expression, a flicker of doubt passing across her features. They didn't tell me they weren't going to your graduation. They just said they wanted a family weekend. Her voice trailed off as the implication settled. Family weekend without the entire family. We stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of years of unbalanced family dynamics hanging between us. When Sophia Bennett spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. They always made it seem like you didn't want to be included, that you preferred books to family time, that you thought you were better than us with all your academic achievements. I shook my head in disbelief. Is that what they told you? Sophia Bennett, I spent my entire childhood desperate to be included, to be noticed. Do you know why I worked so hard in school? Because it was the only time anyone paid attention to me. Because good grades were the only thing that ever made Dad say good job to me. Abby's eyes filled with tears, her carefully applied makeup beginning to smudge. They always made me feel like I was better than you somehow, more deserving of their time and attention. I never asked for that. I never wanted that responsibility. Her defenses crumbled completely, then tears streaming down her face as she sank onto a nearby chair. It was exhausting, Claire. Bennett always being the favorite, always having to be perfect, always knowing that Mom lived vicariously through every social victory, and Dad measured his success by how popular I was. I stood frozen, witnessing my always confident sister break down. This wasn't the confrontation I had expected. A campus security guard poked his head into the auditorium, concerned by the sounds of distress. Everything okay in here, ladies? Sophia Bennett quickly wiped her eyes, leaving black mascara streaks across her cheeks. We're fine, I answered, just having a graduation day conversation. He looked dubious but nodded and withdrew, leaving us in tense silence. Sophia Bennett looked up at me, her expression raw and vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. They always made me feel like I was better than you, she repeated softly. I never asked for that. The honesty of her statement disarmed me. For the first time, I considered how our parents' favoritism might have affected Sophia Bennett, the golden child burdened with impossible expectations, forever responsible for fulfilling our parents' social aspirations. Do you want to ride back to campus? I finally asked, uncertain what else to say. Sophia Bennett nodded, gathering her designer purse with shaking hands. My car's in the shop. Dad dropped me off to find you while they went to your dorm. The walk to my car was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. As we drove the short distance back to campus, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't entirely hostile either. More like the quiet that falls after a thunderstorm when the air is still charged, but the immediate danger has passed. I thought about how this was perhaps the first honest conversation we'd had in years, possibly ever. It wouldn't fix everything. Nothing could erase 2 decades of imbalanced family dynamics overnight, but it felt like something had shifted a tiny crack in the facade that had defined our relationship for as long as I could remember. As we approached the dormitories, I glanced at my tear-stained sister and realized that this confrontation had gone in a direction neither of us could have anticipated. The aftermath of my speech was just beginning, and I still had to face my parents. But for the first time, I wondered if Sophia Bennett might be more of an ally than an adversary in the family. Reckoning that was surely coming. I barely slept that night. After the emotional confrontation with Sophia Bennett in the auditorium, returning to the dorm had brought its own drama. My parents had indeed been there, but finding my room empty, they'd retreated to their hotel with instructions for me to call them immediately. I didn't. Instead, I finished packing with Megan, helped said a temporary goodbye to Daniel, and checked into a cheap motel nearby. I needed space to process everything before facing my parents. The next morning, however, brought an unwelcome surprise. I returned to the dorm to collect my last few boxes and found my parents waiting in the hallway. Outside my room, my mother's face was tight with controlled anger, her normally perfect makeup slightly overdone as if applied in haste. My father stood with arms crossed, his expression a mixture of irritation and impatience, the look he typically reserved for service workers who inconvenienced him. Finally, my mother said when she spotted me, "We've been waiting for almost an hour. You haven't been answering your phone." I unlocked my door, debating whether to invite them in. "I was busy," I replied, matching her cool tone. "Graduating, moving out. You know, the events you were too tired to attend." My father's nostrils flared. "Don't take that tone with us, young lady. After that stunt you pulled yesterday, you should be apologizing, not being sarcastic." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Stunt, you mean telling the truth about being consistently overlooked my entire life." That stunt, I pushed the door open, revealing Megan already inside, organizing the last of our shared belongings. Seeing the tension, she started to excuse herself, but I caught her arm. "Please stay," I said quietly. Having a witness would help keep this confrontation from devolving into their typical gaslighting. My parents filed in, my mother's gaze sweeping critically over the half-packed room. "Your speech was completely inappropriate," she began without preamble. "You humiliated our family in front of hundreds of people. We've received calls from relatives, friends. Even your father's business associates saw that video online." "I'm sorry you feel humiliated by the truth," I replied, surprised by my own calm. "Though I notice you're not denying anything," I said. My father stepped forward, using the intimidating stance that had silenced me so many times throughout childhood. "What exactly do you think you've accomplished with this little performance, besides making your mother cry and creating unnecessary family drama?" I met his gaze steadily. "It wasn't a performance, Dad. It was the culmination of 22 years of being treated like I matter less than Sophia Bennett, of having my achievements dismissed, while her most minor accomplishments are celebrated, of being lied to and excluded from family activities." My mother made an exasperated sound. "You're exaggerating as usual, Claire Bennett. We've supported you just as much as your sister. We paid for your education, didn't we?" "Partially," I corrected. "My scholarship covered most of it. Remember, I moved to my desk and pulled out a folder I'd prepared months ago, never thinking I'd actually use it. But since you brought it up, let's talk about support." I opened the folder and began laying out its contents on my desk. Birthday cards spanning years, family calendars, financial records I'd quietly gathered. For Abby's 16th birthday, you gave her a car. For mine, I got a bookstore gift card worth $50. When Sophia Bennett needed a laptop for school, she got the latest MacBook Pro. I got a refurbished model 2 years older. Every single Christmas, her pile of gifts was noticeably larger than mine. My mother rolled her eyes. "You're seriously comparing gift values? How materialistic." "It's not about the money," I countered. "It's about the message those discrepancies sent." "But fine, let's talk about non-material support." I pulled out a hand-drawn calendar. I tracked every school event for both of us during my junior and senior years of high school. Sophia Bennett had 47 events. You attended 45 of them. I had 39 events. You attended 8. And only when they didn't conflict with anything of Abby's. My father's face had grown increasingly red. "This is ridiculous. You kept records like some kind of prosecutor building a case against your own family." "I kept records because you two gaslight me every time I bring up the disparity in how you treat us," I replied evenly. "Just like you're doing right now." Megan had moved to the window, trying to be unobtrusive, but clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation unfolding. My mother noticed her discomfort and attempted to leverage it. "This is a private family matter. Perhaps your friend should step out?" "No," I said firmly. "Megan stays. She's been more family to me these past 4 years than either of you." The words landed like a physical blow. My mother's face crumpled momentarily before she regained her composure. My father, however, only grew angrier. "After everything we've done for you," he began, voice rising, "we've sacrificed and provided, and this is the thanks. We get a public humiliation. And now these baseless accusations." Something in his tone triggered a memory. My father saying almost the exact same words when I'd questioned why I couldn't attend an academic summer program, while Sophia Bennett was sent to an expensive performing arts camp. Suddenly, a pattern I'd never quite identified came into focus. "This isn't about me at all, is it?" I asked slowly. "This is about you, Dad. Your own insecurities. You resent my academic success because it highlights your own unfulfilled potential." His face went from red to white in an instant. My mother stepped between us. "Claire Bennett, that's enough." But the truth had crystallized with perfect clarity. You were the smart one in your family, weren't you? Dad, the one who was supposed to go to college, become something impressive. But you didn't. You settled for a solid but unexceptional career. And every time I achieved academically, it reminded you of your own disappointments. My father turned away, hands clenched into fists at his sides. His silence confirmed my theory more effectively than any denial could have. I turned to my mother, and you, the pretty popular girl who peaked in high school. You live vicariously through Sophia Bennett because she reminds you of yourself at her age. You pour all your unfulfilled social aspirations into her, dressing her up like a doll, pushing her to be everything you think you could have been. My mother's carefully constructed facade cracked. You have no idea what you're talking about, she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. I have every idea, I countered. I've spent 22 years observing this dynamic. You're not subtle. A knock at the door interrupted our standoff. Sophia Bennett stood in the doorway, eyes red-rimmed from crying, but her expression curiously determined. I thought I'd find you all here, she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Sophia Bennett, my mother, immediately brightened, reaching for her favorite daughter. We'll be done here soon, and then we can go to brunch as planned. Sophia Bennett didn't move into our mother's embrace. Instead, she came to stand beside me, a gesture so unexpected that everyone in the room froze. Actually, Mom, I think we need to finish this conversation. All of us. My parents exchanged alarmed glances. This wasn't part of their script. Their daughters united rather than divided. There's nothing to discuss, my father said firmly. Claire Bennett is being dramatic and trying to make herself the center of attention as usual. No, Dad. Sophia Bennett replied, her voice stronger than I'd ever heard it when addressing our parents. Claire Bennett is telling the truth. You've always favored me, and we all know it. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother recovered first, laughing nervously. Sophia Bennett. Honey, that's not true. We love you both equally. Then why can't you name a single time you chose Claire Bennett over me? Sophia Bennett challenged. Why can't you explain why you lied about being too tired for her graduation when you were actually planning a weekend of activities with me? My father tried a different approach. We're not having this conversation in a dormitory with an audience, he said, glancing pointedly at Megan. This is family business. Fine, I said, surprising everyone. Megan, would you mind giving us the room? I think my family needs to have an honest conversation for once. Megan hesitated, clearly concerned about leaving me. Are you sure? I nodded, and she gathered her purse, squeezing my arm supportively as she left. When the door closed behind her, I turned back to my parents. Let me be very clear about something. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your validation or your attention or your love, though it would have been nice to have had those things growing up. What I do need is honesty. No more gaslighting, no more excuses, no more pretending that the favoritism doesn't exist. My mother sat heavily on the edge of my stripped bed. We never meant to make you feel less loved, she said, and I thought I detected a hint of genuine remorse in her voice. You were always so independent, so self-sufficient. Sophia Bennett needed us more. No, Sophia Bennett interrupted. I didn't need you more. You needed me to need you. There's a difference. Our mother looked stricken. My father remained standing, physical discomfort radiating from his tense posture. What exactly do you want from us? Claire Bennett, an apology? Fine, we're sorry you felt neglected, but this public shaming was completely unnecessary. I didn't do it to shame you. I said truthfully I did it because after 22 years of silence, I needed to speak my truth. And I think a part of me hoped that if I said it loudly enough, publicly enough, you might finally hear me. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, circling through denial, anger, bargaining, and occasionally brief moments of genuine reflection. My father never fully acknowledged his resentment of my academic success, but he didn't deny it either when pressed. My mother cried several times, alternating between genuine remorse and manipulative self-pity. Through it all, what surprised me most was Abby's steadfast support. The sister who had benefited from our parents' favoritism, her entire life was suddenly my strongest ally, pointing out patterns I'd missed, and standing firm when our parents attempted to minimize or dismiss my experiences. By the time our parents finally left with vague promises to think about everything and work on family communication, little had been definitively resolved. They were still angry about my speech, still defensive about their parenting choices, still reluctant to truly acknowledge the damage they'd caused. But something had shifted, nonetheless. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my full truth to my parents without flinching, without apologizing, without backing down. And miraculously, Sophia Bennett had stood beside me when the door closed behind them. Sophia Bennett and I looked at each other in stunned silence. That was she began intense. I finished for her. Thank you for backing me up. You didn't have to do that. Sophia Bennett shrugged an uncharacteristically uncertain gesture from my usually confident sister. I did, though. Everything you said was true. I've known it for years, but it was easier to accept the favoritism than to question it. She perched on the desk chair looking suddenly young and vulnerable. I'm sorry, Claire Bennett. I should have said something sooner. I should have pushed back when they dismissed your achievements or made excuses for missing your events. I leaned against the wall, emotionally exhausted but curiously lighter than I'd felt in years. It wasn't your responsibility to fix our parents' behavior. Maybe not, she conceded, but I could have been a better sister. We fell into conversation then, more honest than we'd ever been with each other. Sophia Bennett admitted she'd always been secretly intimidated by my intelligence and academic success. I confessed to envying her social ease and our parents' obvious adoration. We talked about how our parents' toxic dynamic had shaped us both, me into an achievement-oriented perfectionist desperate for validation, Sophia Bennett into a people-pleaser, terrified of losing our parents' conditional approval. I got offered a job at The Atlantic, by the way. I told her after a lulling conversation, a junior position in their digital media department. I start next month in New York. Abby's eyes widened. Claire Bennett, that's amazing. Why didn't you say anything earlier? I gave her a pointed look and she nodded in understanding. Right? Because Mom and Dad would have found a way to make it about something else. Exactly. Well, I'm genuinely happy for you, she said, and I believed her. Maybe we could get coffee sometime when you're settled in New York. I've been thinking about moving there too. Actually, there are better opportunities for fashion marketing than back home. For the first time in years, possibly our entire lives, I felt a genuine connection with my sister. Not the competition our parents had fostered, not the resentment that had festered, but the possibility of a real relationship built on honesty and mutual respect. As we finished packing up my dorm room together, I realized that while my graduation speech hadn't magically fixed my relationship with my parents, it had created an opening for something I'd never expected: a chance to know my sister as an ally rather than a rival. The summer after graduation passed in a whirlwind of preparations for my new life in New York City. I found a tiny apartment in Brooklyn that I could almost afford on my entry-level publishing salary, packed up the relatively few possessions I'd accumulated during college, and said temporary goodbyes to Daniel and Megan, who promised to visit as soon as possible. My parents called exactly twice during those 3 months, brief, awkward conversations, filled with superficial questions about my moving plans and pointed avoidance of any mention of my graduation speech or our subsequent confrontation. I kept the calls short, neither antagonizing them nor pretending that everything was suddenly fixed. This new phase of our relationship required boundaries I was still learning to establish. The surprise was Sophia Bennett. My sister texted me almost daily, sending everything from apartment listings she thought might suit me to funny memes about sibling relationships. When she visited New York for a fashion industry networking event, we spent a weekend exploring the city together, discovering shared interests and perspectives that had been buried beneath years of parental manipulation. I always thought you hated me, she admitted as we shared overpriced coffee in Central Park. I never hated you. I told her truthfully. I hated being compared to you. I hated being found wanting, but that wasn't your fault. My first months at The Atlantic taught me more about journalism than 4 years of college combined. The pace was relentless, the standards exacting, but for the first time in my life, my perfectionism served me well rather than being a desperate bid for attention. My editors valued my meticulous research and clean writing style. My colleagues appreciated my willingness to help with last-minute fact-checking. I began building a professional identity separate from the achievement-oriented persona I'd constructed to earn parental approval. Therapy helped too. At Daniel's gentle insistence before I left for New York, I'd found a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and childhood emotional neglect. Dr. Simmons didn't offer easy solutions or quick fixes, but she provided invaluable tools for processing the complex emotions surrounding my family. Healing isn't linear. She reminded me during one particularly difficult session after a tense phone call with my mother. There will be steps forward and steps back. The important thing is that you're now aware of the patterns and actively choosing how to respond rather than reacting from old wounds. My contact with my parents remained minimal and carefully managed. I sent polite text updates about my job, responded to their occasional messages, but maintained enough distance to protect my still fragile emotional boundaries. My mother attempted several times to reestablish her authority through guilt. We hardly hear from you anymore, or after everything we've done for you, but I refused to engage with these tactics. My father, true to form, retreated into cool detachment, communicating primarily through my mother, except for the occasional work-related question disguised as fatherly interest. The first holiday season away from home was both liberating and disorienting. Megan invited me to join her family for Thanksgiving, an experience that was eye-opening in its normally parents who asked their children questions. and actually listened to the answers siblings who bickered, but ultimately supported each other conversations that didn't feel like navigating a minefield. Christmas brought an unexpected development. A letter from my father, handwritten on his personal stationery, rather than dictated to his assistant, as most of his correspondence was Claire. Bennett, it began without preamble. I've been thinking about what you said at graduation and afterward about my own academic disappointments and how they might have affected my relationship with you. While I don't agree with all of your characterizations, I recognize there may be some truth to your perspective. My father never attended my school events either. I told myself I was different better, but perhaps I repeated more patterns than I care to admit. This isn't an excuse, merely an observation that has taken me months to acknowledge even to myself. The letter continued for 2 pages. Not quite an apology, but the closest my father had ever come to genuine self-reflection. It ended with an invitation. If you're willing, I'd like to attempt a conversation without your mother present, man-to-man, so to speak. There are things that might be easier to discuss directly. I read the letter several times, emotions cycling between cautious hope and ingrained skepticism. After discussing it with Dr. Simmons, I agreed to meet my father during his upcoming business trip to New York. We met at a quiet restaurant near his hotel, the neutral territory making it easier to maintain my emotional equilibrium. The conversation was stilted at first, both of us falling back on safe topics like my job and his business. But as the meal progressed, something remarkable happened. My father began to talk about his own childhood, about the pressure he'd felt as the smart one in a blue-collar family, about his decision to abandon his academic dreams for the security of accounting. When you started winning all those academic awards, he admitted studying his water glass rather than meeting my eyes. It stirred up regrets I thought I'd buried decades ago. That's not an excuse for how I behaved, but it might help explain it. It wasn't a complete reconciliation. Too much damage had been done for that, but it was a first step toward a more honest relationship. My mother's approach to reconciliation came in her own characteristic way. She sent a care package to my apartment containing my favorite childhood dessert, homemade chocolate chip cookie bars, along with a photo album I'd never seen before. It contained dozens of pictures of me throughout childhood, receiving awards, performing in school plays, studying at my desk. Moments I hadn't realized she'd even documented inside the front cover. She'd written, "I see you, I always did, even when I didn't show it properly." Like my father's letter, it wasn't a full acknowledgement of the past or a promise to change, but it was a gesture that would have been unthinkable before my graduation speech forced our family's dysfunctional dynamics into the open. As winter melted into spring, I found myself blooming in ways I hadn't anticipated. Free from the constant striving for parental approval, I discovered interests and talents I'd never explored: a knack for photography, an enjoyment of rock climbing, a taste for spicy food my mother would have dismissed as too exotic. I built friendships based on genuine connection rather than convenience or strategic value. I even started dating again, though I remained in regular contact with Daniel, our relationship evolving into something that defied conventional labels, deeper than friendship, but allowing space for our individual journeys. Perhaps the most unexpected development was my growing passion for mentoring young writers. The Atlantic had a summer internship program, and I volunteered to help the college students navigate both the technical aspects of digital journalism and the emotional challenges of entering such a competitive field. "You're good at this," my supervisor commented after observing me work with a particularly anxious intern. "You have a gift for helping people find their voice." The irony wasn't lost on me that after spending so many years struggling to be heard, I developed a talent for helping others express themselves. Almost exactly 1 year after my graduation, I received an email from the editor of a major literary magazine. They were doing a special issue on family dynamics and had come across a recording of my valedictorian speech online. Would I be interested in writing an expanded essay based on those themes? The opportunity to transform my personal pain into something that might help others facing similar struggles was too meaningful to pass up. The essay I wrote, titled "Invisible Daughter: Finding Voice in the Shadow of Conditional Love," became the most widely shared piece from that issue. The responses poured in. Hundreds of messages from people who saw their own family experiences reflected in my words, who found validation and hope in my journey toward self-acceptance. One message in particular stood out from Mrs. Harper, my high school English teacher, who had believed in me when my parents couldn't or wouldn't. "I always knew your words would change lives," she wrote. "I just never anticipated how many, including your own that spring." Marked another milestone. Sophia Bennett moved to New York, taking a position with a fashion marketing firm, 10 blocks from my office. We began meeting for weekly lunches, gradually building the relationship we should have had all along. "Do you think Mom and Dad will ever really change?" she asked one day as we shared overpriced salads in Bryant Park. I considered the question carefully. I think they're capable of small changes. Dad's trying in his own limited way. Mom swings between genuine effort and falling back into old patterns, but they're in their 50s with decades of established behaviors and unexamined issues. I don't expect dramatic transformations. Sophia Bennett nodded thoughtfully. So what does that mean for us, for our relationship with them going forward? I think it means we set clear boundaries. We accept whatever positive changes they can make without expecting them to become entirely different people. We build our relationship with each other, separate from them, and most importantly, we break the cycle. We don't carry their dysfunction into our future families. That conversation crystallized the most valuable lesson I'd learned through this entire journey, that while we can't choose the family we're born into, we can choose how we respond to their limitations. We can choose to perpetuate unhealthy patterns or disrupt them. We can choose to remain trapped in roles assigned to us in childhood or write new definitions of ourselves as adults. The healing wasn't complete. Perhaps it never would be entirely. There were still difficult phone calls with my parents, still moments when old hurts resurfaced, still times when I caught myself seeking external validation rather than trusting my inherent worth. But with each passing month, those moments became less frequent, less powerful. I was no longer the invisible daughter desperate to be seen. I had found my voice, and with it a sense of peace I'd never thought possible. As I look back now on that pivotal moment at the graduation podium, realize that by speaking my truth, by refusing to remain silent about the pain of being overlooked, I liberated not just myself, but everyone in my family from the roles we'd been trapped in. Our relationships remain works in progress, but they're now built on honesty, rather than pretense on reality, rather than carefully maintained illusions. So if you're watching this and recognize your own family in my story, if you felt invisible or secondary or somehow less worthy of love, I want you to know that your experience is valid. Your pain deserves acknowledgement. Your voice deserves to be heard. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is speak our truth, even when, especially when it disrupts the comfortable lies we've been living with. Has your family ever made you feel invisible or less important? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and healing. And if you know someone who might find comfort or courage in these words, share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, you deserve to be seen, to be heard, to be valued exactly as you are.